Hello, and welcome to another Rant Rave review for Get Caught Reading Month. We will be discussing the Queen of Mystery, the Queen of Crime, Agatha Christie. Yes, Queen. Yes, she deserves all of her accolades and notoriety and such because her stories are super fun and they are the quintessential cozy in terms of here's your cast of characters, here are all the clues plus a bunch of red herrings. Which ones mean what? And then the denouement at the end. Like, perfect. Perfect. And I particularly like her as an author because she basically is a giant middle finger to all current writing advice. She's like, adverbs, love them. Head hopping, gonna do it. Oh, you thought this was a third person close from this character's perspective? Well, I'm gonna mention what the other characters are thinking. Deal with it. Also, dialogue, so much dialogue. The Miss Marple mysteries are probably 95% dialogue. Like, 10 out of 10. Excellent. Yeah. So don't come to me with your vile writing rules. Agatha Christie is not impressed. Yeah. So, I'm reading her because I am writing a mystery, and thus I'm like, let me imbibe her talents, yes. But the first one of her stories I read was like 5 years ago. I read And Then There Were None, which if you don't know what it is, again, the quintessential bunch of strangers are called to some remote location. They all get picked off one by one who's doing it and why. Like any story that has that storyline is based on And Then There Were None. And I didn't like it. I'm like, this is great. Yeah, no, I felt like there weren't enough clues in that one. Like, there was a cool twist as to how the murderer got away with some of it, but that was the only part that was really cool. The rest was like, meh, like, and the denouement was very just, like, lackluster, like, wah, wah. I will say, I didn't care for the book, because again, I didn't care for the ending. I thought there weren't enough, clues and such. Then I saw a movie that was based on it. I think it was made in the 50s. It was black and white. And they changed the ending. So the premise is not just that these strangers are called to an island and being murdered. The reason they were picked out is because all of them have actually, like, killed somebody in some way or another. Whether that's deliberately murdering someone, or hit and runs, or not saving someone that you should have saved. All these different things. So they're basically like, they deserve death. Yeah, which is interesting. Except in the movie, they're like, well, one of them, she didn't actually do the crime that this person thinks she did. And one of them is not the person that the murderer thinks he is. And it's really, it's an extra twist. And I love it. I'm just like, oh, it's so good. And I believe Agatha Christie might have done the screenplay, which means she's just like, what? I'm going to do an extra twist. Deal with it. Like, it's so cool. I think she did. I could be wrong. But it's quite neat. So, watch that movie. The book is pretty good. People love the book. I'm like, don't trust my opinion. I'm just salty. But, yeah. So, but her most famous of famous characters, are Hercule Poirot and Miss Marple. And there's a couple others, like Tommy and Tuppence. I've only read one of their short stories, and a few other short stories. And what's interesting is, like, a couple of her stories I found extremely predictable, which we'll talk about one in particular, but still enjoyable. And again, it's so interesting because some of them are predictable, and I'm like, okay, like, eye-rollingly predictable. Death on the Nile is eye-rollingly predictable. But I really like all the characters. And I like all the characters in all of her stories. She's super good at characterization. She's super good at... Her red herrings aren't just, clues. They're like storylines. And you're like, is this storyline directed to the main mystery? Sometimes there's side mysteries. Sometimes there's side crimes. So it's all very twisty and turny and highly entertaining. And yeah, and even if you can predict the mystery, either it's super fun anyway, or you don't know everything about it. Like, there was one where I was like, I know this, and then I was like, what? Oh, yeah, we'll get to that. So, fun times. So, First, let's talk about Hercule Poirot. I have not seen, I've not read, but I've seen Murder on the Orient Express, the old movie and the new movie. I prefer the old movie, just in terms of tone. I think it's better. They're doing Death on the Nile this year also, and it's so, like, 3IG5 me. I was like, I read the book, you guys. I don't know. It seems a little, like, trying too hard, and it's a little too dire. Yeah. So I don't know. I don't particularly care for the newer Hercule Poirot movies. Plus, they make him look like Wyatt Earp, whereas he's supposed to be like a short, fat dude. Like, he's supposed to have a mustache that he's extremely proud of, but that's about the only thing they get right in terms of his character. Anyway, so let's talk about the three Hercule Poirot mysteries I actually have read: Death on the Nile, The ABC Murders, and The Clocks. And all of them, I think, are like half predictable, but not entirely predictable. And I can't take credit for ABC Murders because I think I actually read an essay about them before reading it, so I think that the ending was spoiled for me, so I can't take credit. But I like that one because basically there's this person who's killing people off in towns marked like A, B, C, and then eventually D, and they're killing people with the initial A, whose name starts with A, B, C, and eventually D. And you're like, what is it? Are they like a crazy person? Is there some pattern? Is it to throw the police off? Like, probably. Like, yes, it's predictable, but it's good and interesting the way to do it. And what's great is halfway through the book, she's like, here's this guy whose name is like, I forget what it is, but his initials are like ABC, and he's really crazy and kind of kooky, and he's in the town where it's happening. And you're like, wait a minute. Like, Agatha Christie, like, what are you doing? Because it's not the murderer. You're like, this can't be the murderer. You wouldn't show us the murderer. But at the same time, you're like, but why is he in all this? But wait, but is he, like, this is weird. So it's almost like, if a red herring is to throw you off the track, it's like a red herring in that, like, he's not the murderer. So you're like, but why are you showing us this? Like, it's so clever. I don't know. She's just so clever the way that she constructs her stories. So that one's really fun. ABC Murders is good. The Death on the Nile was the one where I felt it was, like, painfully predictable. The main mystery, like, super obvious what was going on. And I don't know why, and I don't want to spoil anything for you guys. But yeah, I was just like, it's really obvious who the murderers are. Like, they're the only ones who could have pulled this off. Like, come on. I don't know. It just, yeah. But the side mysteries, the side characters, what's happened to them is, like, fascinating. And there are side crimes, and I was like, oh, I did not see that coming. And, I just love her little, like, human interest stories. Again, this is why they're cozies. This is like, I feel, where, like, the idea of a cozy, like, nowadays, the, cheese shop mysteries and tea shop mysteries, I feel like that came from Agatha Christie's idea of, like, here's a little story about, like, I don't know, just human interest. Like, people who, some of them are obviously not the murderers, but you care about, like, are they gonna, like, follow their dreams? Are they gonna fall in love? Are they gonna stop stealing stuff? And you care about them. It's so great. Yeah. And then, so that one's pretty good, even if it's painfully predictable. The Clocks is much better. The Clocks. I'm trying to remember all the, basically, and what's interesting about Agatha Christie's, both Poirot and Miss Marple, is sometimes they're, like, barely in the story. So in The Clocks, it's this young detective who, he's not even a detective, he's like a marine biologist, but he's working for, like, the government, basically, to catch spies because the Cold War, I think, yeah. And some other spy got killed and had a note where, I'm trying to remember what it is. It's like M with a moon symbol. And so he's, like, investigating, like, bars and taverns with moon or crescent, and then eventually he's, like, exhausted all of those, so he starts looking at places where it's, instead of saying street, it's crescent, and he eventually stumbles upon this, well, he doesn't, there's this girl who is called to deliver this thing to this house, who, she sees a dead body in the house and belongs to this blind woman and who almost steps on the dead body, and the girl's like, don't do it, and she screams and runs into the hands of the young detective, and he immediately like falls for her, but he refuses to say that he falls for her. Human interest stories. And and there's also all these different clocks, including one of the ones that one of the girls owned, and it's extremely twisty-turny, and you're like, is it related to the spies? Is it related to like, who's this guy who's murdered? Half of the thing is, who is this murdered guy? And it's very twisty-turny and bizarre and weird, and like, and the final revelation is like completely out of there. You're like, literally, no one could have seen that coming. Like, if you see this coming in the clocks, not the spy revelation at the end of the story, but the murder revelation, like, there's no, I was like, I never crossed my mind. But from the very beginning of the story, he's like, M Crescent, and I'm like, W Crescent. It's Wisteria Crescent. That's where it all happens, or something. And I was like, is this supposed to be a twist? And at the end, he like turns it over and he's like, oh, like Crescent W. And again, like, that's not super predictable, but there is a thing, like, the house that it actually refers to, I kind of predicted. I was like, I bet that this is, yeah. But it's just fun. I don't know. It's so twisty-turny and fun and stupid, and I'm like, there's like a Ace Attorney shaped hole in my heart, and this has like filled a lot of it. Someday, maybe next year, I'll discuss Ace Attorney. Anyway, so that's Hercule Poirot, which are good, but I will say they're a little too dire, I guess, and a little too like detectives. I mean, there's lots of detectives in Miss Marple too, but I love the Miss Marple stories. Love. I haven't read all of them, but I'm working my way. I read audiobooks, so I'm like, as many audiobooks as I can find of them. Yeah, let me see, which ones have I? Oh, Miss Marple, where are you? Let's see. I'm pulling up a bibliography right now. Yes, it's very true. I have read all of them except for 450 from Paddington Station, Mirror Cracked from Side to Side, A Caribbean Mystery. Oh, I guess I've actually not read like 5 of them. Interesting. Well, that's good because I love them. And what I think is so fascinating is people always list Miss Marple as like an amateur detective, and I'm like, she's not. She is, I would describe her as a side character who completely steals the show. In every story, it's like, there'll either be an actual narrator, first-person narrator, or like the main characters doing all their stuff, and Miss Marple's over here like gardening, or taking a vacation, or like, you know, she happens to know the person who got murdered, and so she like goes into town to like collect their effects. And then she's like, oh, by the way, like, here's, like, what happened. And it's excellent. And basically, her as a character is she's this fluffy little old lady who basically thinks the worst about people and is usually right. And in the first story, I love, it's Murder at the Vicarage. I want a copy of it. It's so good. And it's first person. It's from the point of view of a vicar. And he is this, like, put upon, like, just normal guy who basically has to deal with, like, really gossipy old ladies in his town, and his kind of, like, crazy younger wife who he thinks is, like, he's, like, she's too, like, young and, like, I don't know, fun for him, and his little, like, nephew who's, like, he's dealing with his own things, and it's just adorable, and that's, again, there's, like, lots of twisty-turny things, and that one was the one that made me, like, have to apologize to Agatha Christie, because Death in the Nile is super predictable. I was like, this is obvious. This is what's happening. And then in Murder at the Vicarage, I was like, this is obvious. This is what's happening. And then she was like, wrong. This is actually what's happening. And I was like, I'm an idiot. And it's extremely similar to Death on the Nile, but, like, I didn't see it coming. I, like, was way too, like, arrogant. I was like, I can tell this. And I was like, no, I was 100% wrong. And it was great. It's so good. But also the characters are great. The vicar is hilarious. He has these, like, dry, sarcastic sense of humor. And again, the whole time, it's just, like, these village ladies know everything because they all talk to each other and constantly eavesdrop. And Miss Marple is amongst them, but she's also, like, the most perceptive and, you know, happens to be outside gardening when she sees this thing, and happens to always, basically, like, typecast people. Like, she'll be like, this reminds me of some other horrible event that happened when I was a girl, or, like, this person reminds me of that person. And so it's so funny because it's literally like an old lady who just, like, is nosy and thinks the worst, and it's usually right. And I'm like, it's so good. Yeah, so that one made me eat my own words, and it was excellent. Let's see what else. Body in the Library was okay. It had a good twist, but it wasn't particularly interesting. The Moving Finger was one where it was fairly predictable, but it was not, it was just predictable, it was just twisty enough to be like, oh, like, you kind of figured something was happening, but you couldn't exactly figure out, maybe, like, the course of events, if that makes sense. I don't want to spoil any of these. They're all really good. That one is, there's this person who's writing all these vicious, not blackmail, but just, like, salacious letters to people being like, oh, I know that you're, like, sleeping with so-and-so, and none of them are true. Like, they're all just lies. But everybody in the entire village is getting them, and I'm like, what's going on? And finally, somebody, like, commits suicide because, like, maybe it was right. Or was it? And yeah, you know, like you do. And that one is super human interest of, like, you hope these two characters get together, and you hope these two characters get together, and they do! Yay! Shipping! Like, this is Agatha Christie. Like, she's everything you could want in an author. Like, read her, people. Read her! What else? They Do It With Mirrors. That was decent. Pocketful of Rye. I'm trying to remember. I feel like that one was pretty darn good. That one was very twisty-turny in terms of, like, basically this person, it's like there's, like, 3 different murders. The first murder is this guy is killed in his office, and randomly he has, like, rye seeds in his pocket. And then I forget if there's an in-between murder, but then there's this, one of the maids in his house is killed when she's getting the laundry down, and, like, there's, like, a pin clipped to her nose, which, and it turns out that Miss Marple, like, had that maid as a, like, little maid, like, she basically, like, helps train maids, like, young girls, and so she comes to basically try and, you know, to tell what she knows about her, and she's just, like, extremely enraged, like, not just that she was murdered, but that you would, like, clip a, like, clothespin onto somebody's corpse, and it makes her, like, very angry, and it's so, like, I love her personality, because she's just this old lady, and she just says it like it is, and she realizes that all these different murders are referring to that nursery rhyme, like, the king was in his counting house, counting all his money. I don't remember. There's a rhyme, and then each of the murders has to do with it, and they're like, well, why would the person, like, do that? And it's twisty and turny, and again, that was the one where, like, I didn't know who it was, and then when I found out, I was like, oh, interesting, yeah. So that was a really good one. You should read that one. You should read all the Miss Marple mysteries. Just read them all. They're so excellent. Blah, 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 blah. I just finished reading... Oh, wait! A Murder is Announced. A Murder is Announced is the one where I figured out who did it immediately, but then the motive was like, whoa! It, like, blew my mind. It was an Ace Attorney level blowing your mind. That one, basically, everybody's in the village and they all read the little newspapers, and it's basically in the classifieds, it's like, a murder is announced, or, like, in the, you know, like, it would be a marriage is announced, but it says a murder is announced at such and such a lady's place, friends come, like, this is all I'm gonna say. And so it's very weird, and everyone's like, oh, it must be, like, a murder mystery party, haha, like, I guess we'll show up. And then the lady who owns the house is like, oh, jeepers, like, who did this? Some joker, we're gonna have random people get the cheese and wine out, I guess people are gonna show up, like, who knows? And then, of course, everyone shows up, the lights go out, someone gets killed, like you do, and it's like, who did it? Yeah, and so it's all the people at the party and all these different twisty-turny things, and it's really obvious who the murderer is, but, like, not the motive at all. And the more you read, again, like I feel like I should have understood. I feel like I should have figured it out. But there are tons of clues, and at the end, you're like, what? Oh, it was really great. Murder is announced. Yeah. And then finally, the last one I read is, where is it? At Bertram's Hotel. And this one was okay. It was okay. It was fun, but I don't know. I feel like it's probably my least favorite one so far. So we'll see. But yeah, what I like about all the Miss Marple mysteries is, again, she's not the main character. Like in Bertram's Hotel, it's the actual police are like investigating his disappearance and this like bank robberies and all this stuff. In A Murder is Announced, it's like all the different people involved. Pocket Full of Rye, it's all the different people involved. Moving Finger, it's this like random brother and sister who've moved out to the country and they're like, what the frig? We moved out here to like have a calm, quiet life, and there's like murder and salacious notes and stuff. And then like Miss Marple appears, and it's, I don't know, it's just such a fun formula, and I love it. So yeah, Agatha Christie, 10 out of 10, give it a read, especially the Miss Marple stories, and all the rest as well. There's a reason that she is the Queen of Mystery, so yeah. Bye-bye. Next week will be True Crime.